All right, well, we're going to talk about this place. This is more than 3/4 of the world's surface. It's also 99% of the space on Earth where things live. We normally don't think about it at all. And we're going to talk mainly about how the ocean is changing, what those changes mean for people, and what they mean for wildlife. People think of the oceans in different ways. For most people, the oceans are sort of a magical and majestic kind of place. For other people, the ocean is the place where they do their recreation. For many people, the ocean is the source of the raw material for their businesses. And for billions and billions of creatures, the ocean is simply their home. I've seen the ocean from all these different perspectives. This is me at about age 5 on the left. I started my research and collecting career a little bit early in life. And this is what we call in fish science, this is called early life history stages. These are my early life history stages. Starting as a small kid and always just really enjoying to do a lot of fishing and a lot of being near the water and being near the seabirds. And as I got a little bit older, I was faced with a terrible thing, which is called adulthood. And the question was, how can one avoid growing up? Well, it turned out that there's a social institution that can prevent adulthood indefinitely. It's called graduate school. And I took full advantage of it. And I studied seabirds. I studied how seabirds interact with the fish that they eat and the predatory fish that they compete with. Mostly I studied these birds called terns. This is a roseate tern. It's endangered. It also breeds in the state of Maine. And for quite a few years, this is what my office looked like. It was pretty good. It wasn't just a picture on the wall. I also continued to do a lot of fishing, and as I followed the birds offshore, I started fishing for things that I had heard about, but up until that time they were sort of mythical creatures to me. And I started meeting them face to face. And this is one of them. This is a mako shark. And that looks like a big dangerous predator, and it is. And this was exciting. It was adventure. It seemed like good, clean fun at the time. But the other thing about that animal on the screen there is that the mako shark matures, if it is a male, at 300 pounds, and if it is a female, it starts reproducing at about 700 pounds. And this is a little over 200 pounds. So it's a big solitary predator. On land, it would be something like a grizzly bear, and killing one that is not yet mature is the moral and ecological equivalent of shooting a bear cub. So seen in that light, this sort of pales as an activity. And the more I got really informed and experienced about the ocean, the more I started looking around at what was going on, because something was occurring to me. It seemed that when I first started going out after those seabirds and first started going offshore looking for the fish, there were a lot at the beginning, and then it seemed like over the course of the years there was less of everything. And I wanted to know whether this was a correct perception or just something odd going on locally. So I found out that over the world, you look at the ocean from the shore, you almost never see a fishing boat. It's very odd. But over the world, there were things going on at a scale that I couldn't imagine before. On the lower right, that is one pull of a net with a fish. You see they all look sort of orange. Those fish are called orange roughy. And for a few years, in every restaurant, there were orange roughy on the menu. Now you basically don't see them. Why don't you see them? We ate them all. That fish starts to breed when it is 30 years old. That's 20 tons of them in one pull of the net on one boat one day. They have no predators that eat them 20 tons at a bite, except us. What you see in the net is only part of the story. The future is also in that net. A color photograph of somebody cutting up a whale. Whaling is not something that just happened in the 1800s and 1700s. Most whaling happened in the 20th century. Many great whales lived to be over 100 years old, it turns out. And many of the baby whales that should have come from those whales that we killed by the hundreds of thousands should still be populating the ocean. They're missing. We killed them. This is a fish called the bluefin tuna. It's also called the giant tuna. They don't call it the giant tuna for nothing, as you see here. This was once an important and very common fish in the Gulf of Maine. It's a warm-blooded fish. It can swim well over 50 miles an hour when it's chasing its food. It can cross the ocean from one coast to the next. It's the world's most valuable sushi. Now, I'm going to read you a short passage from a book that I wrote that's called Song for the Blue Ocean. And this passage goes with this picture because it's about a day that I was offshore in my boat, very calm day. And then what caught my eye was a faint chevron bulging ever so slightly from that molten, glassy sea 50 yards from where I sat adrift. As I rose to my feet to study it, the chevron grew to a distinct wake, but it was a wake without a boat. The wake ran along the surface for a few seconds, picked up speed, and exploded like a revelation. A giant bluefin tuna, among the largest and most magnificent of animals, hung suspended for a long, riveting moment, emblazoned and backlit like a saber-finned warrior from another world, until its 600 pounds of muscle crashed into the ocean like a boulder falling from the sky. That morning, I saw something. Not exactly new. It wasn't the first tuna I had seen, but I saw something differently. I saw this fish not as a struggling opponent at the end of a line or the prop against which my sport was framed, not as the prospective evening meal, not as dollars at the fish house. I saw it instead as a wild animal, the perfect master of its element, no less spectacular than a bear or an eagle. No less spectacular, but perhaps even more venerable. In a world older and more complete than ours, Henry Beston wrote in The Outermost House, they move finished and complete. The bluefin tuna is clearly complete, and some say it's nearly finished. Scientists calculate its population off the eastern seaboard has plummeted over 90% since the 1970s. Reproduction is now very low. But commercial fishermen, good fishermen and good people, say this is hogwash. The fish are abundant. They've simply changed their migration routes. In other places, they're increasing in numbers, they say. This debate is more than academic because an adult bluefin tuna may be worth more to the person who can kill one than any other animal on the planet, rhinos and elephants included. Probing for the truth in this debate requires following the bluefin, and its trail leads in many directions, but mostly it leads through the looking glass, revealing that while the ocean may look the same as it has for millennia, it has changed, and changed greatly. Bluefin tuna were caught in many different ways for thousands of years. Aristotle was the first person to write about catching them, and in the Mediterranean, they were caught in fish traps for millennia. They were the subject of art, of writing. Salvador Dali's take on the fish traps looks like this painting called Tuna Fishing. Salvador has lots of naked women in this shot, and I've gone back to the original photograph looking for them. I can't seem to find them. We once caught them like there was no tomorrow, and as a result, that's what we got. We treated them like we treated the buffalo, like we treated the passenger pigeon, and basically what we did was we took this magnificent, as I say, warm-blooded, ocean-crossing fish, and bite by bite, we simply ate them all. Now, I do think it's okay to use what's in the ocean. I think it's just not okay to use it up. I'm not going to tell you never to eat seafood, and we'll get to that in a minute. We've done the same things with sharks around the world. The sharks in this net are all over 20 years old. You cannot catch 20-year-old fish day after day in the same place. You have to keep it moving. So it's more like a mining operation or a clear-cutting operation. I'm from Long Island, and our closest city is New York. New York is my home city. In New York, we have the theater district or the garment district. In Hong Kong, there's a shark fin district. For several blocks on both sides of the street, every shop sells shark fins from all over the world. Millions of sharks, tens of millions of sharks go through there every year. Sharks kill about 10 people a year. People are winning. Sharks are losing. Right off this coast, all the large sharks are in long-term decline. Most of them are caught with fishing gear called long lines. These are fishing lines that are on average about 25 miles long and have hundreds or thousands of hooks. And here's what has happened with long lining in the world. This is the 1950s. See if I have a better pointer here. Okay, 1950s, 60s, 80s, 90s. The warm colors are high catch rates. When longliners started, they started from Japan and they began moving out. So you can see the basic pattern is at the edge of where they're fishing, in the new water, there are high catch rates. They move out across the Pacific, they're into the South Pacific, high catch rates, Indian Ocean, high catch rates. They take an exploratory trip into the Atlantic tropics. They find incredible amounts of fish, especially bluefin tuna. They catch more bluefin tuna in the 1960s than have ever been caught before. No bluefin tuna have been seen in the Atlantic tropics there since that time. They seem to be extinct there. It must have been a separate population that was never really identified, never really studied, driven extinct in a few years. After wiping this out, they go north and south. The catches have cooled off throughout the entire Pacific Ocean, throughout the entire Indian Ocean. Still high catch rates in the North Temperate Atlantic here and in the South Temperate Atlantic until the next decade when the catch rates are down an average of 90% from the 1950s. We ate 90% of the fish in the ocean. Basically, once upon a time, the ocean was full of fish and a lot of them were big. Now the ocean has a far fewer number of fish. Most of them are much smaller. And the bottom of the sea is simplified because we drag nets back and forth and back and forth. Some places on the continental shelves are hit with nets 17 times a year. And the thing is, we forget. We forget what the world is supposed to look like. We forget what the world is supposed to be like. The baselines and the reference points are gone because we all think the world is supposed to look like it was when we first saw it. In addition to all of that direct fishing, every time people go fishing, they catch stuff that they're not trying to catch. And that is called bycatch or bykill. This guy, South Carolina, he opens his net on the deck. Here's what he's caught. What do you think he's fishing for? He's fishing for shrimp. This is the garbage. It was sea life 10 minutes ago. This is the broom. This is the hole in the side of the boat. There it goes. It's all dead. There's a shrimp. Now, I've been lucky enough to travel around to lots of really remote places in the ocean where these incredible birds breed. These are albatrosses. There are about 24 species of albatrosses in the world. They live to be 60 years old. They mate for decades. They mate for life, as the phrase goes. And you can see that they're very, very devoted to each other. They have lives and they have relationships. They live mainly in cold temperate places. They live in the tropics in only the Galapagos Islands. I've seen them in most of these places. They're spectacularly beautiful animals. They care for their young for many months, the longest of any bird. Some species take 13 months, over a year, to raise a chick. Some of them look like Art Deco. Some of them have wings spanning 11.5 feet tip to tip, the longest wings in nature. If you ever doubted that birds descended from dinosaurs, you can take a look at this picture. Okay, this is the whole North Pacific Ocean. Here's Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, Canada, San Francisco, the coast of North America, the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia. Here's Hawaii, and these are the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, very tiny islands that go out for 1,000 miles, separated by hundreds of miles usually. And a satellite-tracked albatross that I named Amelia was nesting here. She has a chick in a nest at this place called French Frigate Shoals. While the chick is in the nest, she goes on a foraging trip. The foraging trip lasts from March 16th to April 14th, almost a month. The chick is waiting. The father is doing the same thing. So the chick is probably waiting for an average of 2 weeks between meals. Amelia goes 1,000 miles north. She hits this frontal zone. She finds food here. You can see that the track starts to loop. She travels along the front where the warm currents and the cold currents meet. She finds more food here. She comes all the way back along the front and then just makes a right turn and goes about 1,200 miles back to the nest as though she has a GPS unit in her head, which she does. And she feeds the chick. She feeds the chick about 30% of its body weight. And then in about 10 minutes, she just leaves again and does the same thing. I think also there was a reason she comes back the 14th of April. These islands are owned by the United States, and I think she had to file her taxes. These islands are farther from any continent than any place in the world, but they don't look it when you go there because all of our calling cards and business cards wash ashore in the form of fishing tackle, pop bottles, toothbrushes, toy soldiers, welcome mats, bowling balls float in the Pacific Ocean, incredibly enough. And so when the albatross is wandering the ocean looking for food for its chick, it picks up lots of things that are edible and lots of things that have edible things growing and clinging to them. In the past, that might have been little bits of wood or pieces of floating pumice. Now it includes things like screw tops from plastic jars. All of the chicks are packed with plastic. Some of them die. It's certainly never good for them. There's a chick that has died. It's actually close to fledging. It's almost 6 months old. It is packed with cigarette lighters. In the middle of the ocean, this bird, with this exhaustively caring parent, is packed with cigarette lighters. When you look at this, you don't say, oh, is that sustainable? Oh, there's a policy problem. You just look at that and you say, this is wrong. This is not the relationship with the world that we are supposed to have. It's not the relationship with the world that we want, but it is the relationship we have made. After the chick is big, the adult comes back, takes a look, looks at the sun, and says, you know what, I'm not going to go 6,000 miles again just to come back and see that the chick has left. So I'm out of here. And she's released from her parental duties. She's now down about 1/3 of her body weight. She goes out. She goes to many of the same places and feeds very, very heavily. She's untethered from the nest at this point. This is from the end of May to the beginning of August, up to the Central Pacific, all the way across the Bering Sea. You can see where she's got food, where she finds food, and where she's traveling. She has command of the whole ocean. She's not the only one out there because where she finds food is where food is concentrated. And where food is concentrated, people who set those long lines and run fishing boats also know about those places. And so these birds are caught accidentally and drowned. Here's one that is drowned on a long line set for bluefin tuna, my favorite fishery in the world. They catch them at rates that are high enough to send the populations downward long term. This boat is deploying one of those long lines, and here is the line going out. There's a hook with bait, a hook with bait, a hook with bait. It's fishing for halibut and black cod in the Gulf of Alaska. But you see these other lines here hanging down from above, right over the line that's going out. Usually when the line is going out is when the birds are trying to get the bait. That's when they get hooked. By the time it's back here, where you see all the birds, it has gone too deep for the birds to reach it. It turns out that these lines are specifically to scare the birds. And when this boat did this, the first year they tried it, they went from catching albatrosses most of the time to not catching a single bird of any kind for the whole fishing season. Problem solved with 3 pieces of rope. Here's another view. Thousands of albatrosses behind this boat. Here is the line that would kill them. 2 pieces of rope and a few red streamers. The birds are afraid of it. They're afraid to strike their wing. They stay away. This is in the Falkland Islands, where albatrosses were in long-term decline. The mortality is down by 97 to 99% in the last 5 years when these 2 pieces of rope became mandatory. So we can fix a lot of these problems. Turtles also get tangled up, along with birds, in fishing gear. I wrote a book about this incredible animal called the leatherback turtle. They average about 1,000 pounds. They dive deeper than anything that breathes air, deeper than whales, deeper than penguins, deeper than elephant seals. And they also have these incredible cross-oceanic migrations. This is where they breed. This is where they go for food. They run into lots of trouble with fishing gears, and they're caught by the tens and, in fact, by the hundreds of thousands, different types of sea turtles. They swallow hooks. Here's an X-ray with a turtle with a hook in the middle of its body. It turns out that if you take the straight point of a hook and you bend it inward so it's a little bit more like a ring, you can decrease the turtle mortality by 90% by bending the tip of the hook. Because instead of it lodging in their gut, it comes up and gets caught in the corner of their mouth, or it doesn't hook them at all. You can also put a thing that looks like a barbecue grill in a net with a little flap. All the stuff you want to catch goes through the grate. The turtle comes out the flap. As a result, these populations are recovering. So one of my messages is the oceans are sick, not necessarily dying. And what do we need to do to make them healthy? I think of fish like this. Most people think of fish like that. They do have an image problem. We like them mostly on the table. My group puts out these consumer guides to seafood at blueocean.org. We have a new seafood guide, and you can get lots of information. You can annoy your friends at dinner, and you can also, if you don't have your guide, you can text us 30644 with the message fish and the name of the thing you're interested in, like fish striped bass or fish clams. Doesn't have to really be a fish. There's a lot of increasing attention on the sea. A lot of people want to do the right thing. Even Walmart has announced it's going to have sustainable seafood in the future. Things can recover from very low levels to very high levels. A fish that I really enjoy catching, the striped bass. I used to thrill to catching bluefin tuna and mako sharks. I don't do that anymore. For the most part, they're not there anymore. These fish have recovered. They can. We can get back into harmony with the ocean with a lot of creativity and hard work. We can put things back to the way they were. We can go back to the future. But now we have another really big problem, which is the whole world is changing. The systems are changing. We're warming the planet. The ice systems are melting. Everything that depends on ice is having its habitat changed. Polar bears that depend on ice are losing their hunting grounds. And all the seals that they hunt are also losing their habitat. It's not just polar bears. Not only is it getting warmer, the pH is falling. People don't realize when we talk about global warming and climate change that it's really the carbon burden of the planet. The whole ocean pH is changing. That pH change threatens now to reduce the growth rates of everything that has a calcium carbonate shell, all the hard corals, clams and oysters, all the shellfish, many of the plankton that are the very bottom of the food chain. In the future, if this continues, the ocean itself will dissolve the coral reefs because the ocean is turning acidic. Now, what does this mean? Are we doing something to the natural environment that's a an impractical thing? Are we desiccating God's creation? How do we view this, and what is really going on? What's our place in it? I've done a little bit of work with Christian evangelicals and scientists, many of whom are atheists. And you can see us here on this trip to Alaska. You can easily tell the evangelicals from the scientists. Regardless of what we believe and regardless of who is right about what we believe, we are all in the same boat. If the ark sinks, we all go down. This guy told Ronald Reagan to make a speech to the evangelicals about the evil empire. As a result of that military buildup, this guy started the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and shared a Nobel Prize. These were mortal enemies 20 years ago. Now we realize we have bigger problems that we need to work on together. We went to a little island called Shishmaref, a town called Shishmaref, Alaska, on this little island in Alaska. Their houses are falling into the ocean because the ocean doesn't freeze in the fall. Big storms come, it takes the land away 20 feet at a time. They had a storm, they lost 50 feet of land. This place has been occupied by people for 4,000 years because it's perfectly suited for hunting. There are 600 American citizens who live there. These are Inuit people. They're all American citizens. 600 people. They need to move 5 miles to land that no one contests. It's free and clear. It's part of their traditional hunting territory. Everybody says, fine, go there. They need $60 million. They can't find $60 million. They didn't create the problem that's destroying their town. They don't know what to do. They're afraid that they will be flung to the far corners of the cities of Alaska. They'll lose their integrity as a group of people. Their whole future is threatened. All right. Now, if we can't move 600 Americans 5 miles to land that is uncontested, what happens when it comes time to move Bangladesh? Where do all those people go when they have to move 5 miles? What will happen? These problems are not environmental problems. These are problems that threaten the order of the world. They threaten civilization. They threaten peace. We also went to see these glaciers. There was a big glacier here 5 years ago. There it is. Now it's a mile up the valley. We went to see salmon spawning. The water in southern Alaska is getting too warm for salmon to spawn. Their eggs don't hatch at the normal rate in Alaskan waters sometimes anymore. I also went to do Zanzibar in Tanzania recently. There are lots and lots of people there. They're poor, they're hungry, they have many kids. There also, the religious people are awakening to the idea that these are moral problems. Religions have typically thought that the environmental problems have nothing to do with them. That view is changing. All right, now, this is a bird called a fairy tern. I took this picture at Midway Atoll, out in almost the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That's why it's called Midway. And to me, I can't imagine anything really more beautiful than this. I think the gates of heaven themselves must look like this. Now, whether or not you believe that you're going to pass the gates of heaven, you might think that either this is what you'd like to see when you close your eyes for the last time, or what you'd like to see when you open your eyes for the first time after death. It really doesn't matter, because no matter what we believe about the nature of heaven and earth, about whether or not this is all we have or we will go to an afterlife, regardless of all of that, the fact is that no tradition, no religious tradition, no moral tradition, no philosophical tradition in the history of humanity has ever taught that our role on earth is to destroy the planet. So that's it. I'm also out of time. Andrew's pushing me off the stage, and I thank you very much for your attention.